Hey everybody, my name is James Medeiros. I'm your room monitor, username DJMEDEIR in IRC. Welcome. I'm so excited today to introduce this talk, Empowering Users by Asking Them for Money with Martin Owens. Before I read his bio, hey, I have to say we've just been spending probably the last I think a whole hour even, chatting. He's a really cool guy. He'll be presenting a topic, as I said, called Empowering Users by Asking Them for Money, which I think is great. He's a software programmer currently focused on the Inkscape graphic program, which I'm sure you've all heard about, and on economics in the free software ecosystem. Martin and other Inkscape developers have been using personal funding platforms to raise the money to make their work more stable and user-focused. And in this talk, he'll tell you about his experiences and his ideas on how to change free software economics from the current business model on business versus volunteers to a more equitable arrangement for both users and developers. Before I turn it over to him, just a reminder, I know you've been here for a while, please do submit your questions in the IRC throughout the chat, because we're going to have a nice dedicated chunk of Q&A time at the very end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Martin. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, James. Thank you, everybody, for joining my talk here at LibrePlanet. A big thank you to the organizers for selecting this talk. I'm pretty excited to talk about this topic with a wider audience. Now, everything here is based on my experiences and thoughts, and I am interested in the questions and conversations at the end, because this is a contentious topic sometimes. Let's see. So the first thing is, every time I talk about programmers, what I really mean is like any skilled creator. So whether it's an artist or a video maker or anyone, but I'm here really to talk to programmers specifically about their work. But this talk is about users. It's not about developers. As a community, we've talked a lot about programmers needing to be paid for their work. In this talk, I'm going to be focusing instead on users themselves. This doesn't mean that I've forgotten programmers, but I wanted to, focus things on users themselves and what this means for them. Programmers are powerful. In the free software world, they're free to exercise the full range of freedoms through their exclusive knowledge and confidence in the art of programming. Non-programmers, on the other hand, don't have the skills and are excluded from exercising one of the most powerful freedoms that we have in the free software universe, which is the freedom to change the software to make it do what you want it to do. Freedom for me is skills plus the will to make change. And a free software programmer has both the freedom, to do these things and to know how to do it. Where a user might have the need to make changes, but they don't often have the skills necessary. And sometimes maybe they have the skills, but they don't have the time necessary. As a community, how do we currently serve users so that with the kinds of changes that they might need to the free software that they use in their everyday life? First is we often ignore users completely. This is a predominant view of especially smaller projects, and it's a natural outcome of the kind of participatory communities where programming literacy is the entry price. And if you can't program, you're not really free in these communities to the same extent. The next type of way in which we serve users is what I term charitable paternalism. Larger projects have developed a more sophisticated way of serving non-programmers. This is the notion of charitable paternalism, and there's a lot of good work that happens in the name of charity in the free software world. And it's a very important part of who we are as a community. There are kindness and compassion for others allows us to help users with their programming needs. But imagine you have a large, well-regarded project, a project that is deeply generous, and yet it still doesn't listen to its users very much. Maybe because it doesn't really have a need to. The project will have well-meaning paternalism, a sense that the project knows what's best for users, and the people that work in the project are best placed to make the decisions about what should be developed and what shouldn't. This can create great software, and we have many great examples of this model, but it's not freedom for users. The next way in which we can interact with users is basically indenture responsibility. This is where projects and programmers that want to listen to users, they spend time finding out what users want, and they help them and program for their needs, even if they don't necessarily agree with the changes that the user needs. But they do the work because they're responsible and they're generous. But this creates a labor rights issue, right? The bigger the user that's making requests for changes, the more problematic this kind of relationship gets. But it's problematic all the way down, right? Working for free on other people's needs is not always a good idea. It's often not stable. Programmers who serve the users' interests while not making a living, they're servants to the public interest. Many programmers also shy away from being as generous as they could otherwise be to user needs, simply because of a sense of responsibility that will inevitably lock them into continuing to work for free. So what do we do? Introducing money. So this talk is hard for me. Politically, I'm a socialist, right? Public ownership is in my core. I don't want money to be a solution, but in the world that we have, the mechanisms that we have, markets and money are a serious tool that we can choose to use, while understanding that there are risks and there are downsides as well, which I'm going to cover. Purpose of money in the free software project is to enable programmers to carry out the will of the user. It's not supposed to be a reward for past deeds, but a payment for the service of programming on the behalf of somebody else. The programmer becomes the conduit through which the user's freedom to change the software is carried out. But users' ideas can be terrible. Right? A programmer can act as a guide and a worker and advise users about the best kinds of changes which are most likely to be merged into a project. It's good for the user. Merged changes are more stable and valuable. But if a user asks the programmer to fit wheels to a tomato, she accepts the job. Personal thoughts is completely valid, right? Serving a user's needs, that's kind of the point of freedom, right? It's not about what the project wants or the programmer wants. It's about what the user wants. Right? The project's freedom is only in deciding whether the work should be merged or not, right? Not whether the work should be ever done at all. So is this just a support service? So the way I think of it, support is when you go into somebody else's home and you fix their computer. Programming for somebody is when they come to your office, tell you what to program. Right? There's a fundamental difference between fixing an individual issue in a deployment and acting as an agent for a user's freedom. Companies like Red Hat and Canonical and others, they serve regular users through support contracts, allowing them to invest the money that they get for those services into free desktop ecosystems, for example. It's true that they do a lot of good work. Vast majority of it is really good. But now we're back to paternalism, except this one isn't charitable, right? There's always going to be half an eye that corporations will be putting towards the people who are actually paying them for work, right? And users that are not involved in that ecosystem, they won't have a voice in what gets developed. So we in the free software universe have spent a long time and effort creating infrastructure for programmers, legal infrastructure, technical infrastructure, charitable infrastructure, and more. But the weak arm has always been our economic infrastructure, mostly because as a community, we're not yet convinced that there's a need to have any. And I'm going to discuss three methods that I currently use to engage in some economic activity. First is bartering. Now, I know this might sound like a cheat, but it's worth mentioning that paying doesn't have to involve money, currency. I've taken jobs where the payment was work that I needed somebody else to do. Informal bartering within a project can be a great social lubricant, but it could and should also be offered to people outside of the project, right? I've done several barters for Inkscape fixes, And in fact, the graphics for this slide were bartered with some Inkscape designers and artists so that they could help me make these slides. And in exchange, I fixed some specific issues with Inkscape that they needed, right? I paid attention to their needs in this exchange. As a community, we could be more open to finding situations where we could barter our skills, right? We don't have to have a formal system for it, but we should always be thinking, you know, is there a way of helping this person that I have, paying attention to their needs in some non-monetary way? Maybe there is. Second is contracting. Now, I'm an independent contractor. That's primarily what I've been doing for the last few years. Most paid free source and software is done like this through contracting. It's a process whereby a business will come to a programmer, set out a programming job that they want, and the programmer delivers it, hopefully within the free software project itself. But it's hard to find good, trustworthy contractors that have been vetted. There's no standard website that you can go to find out, to find a good, whether a programmer is good or not, whether they've been involved in the project or not. And likewise, it's very hard for programmers to find good businesses that understand what investing in free software means, without that business expecting exclusivity to the code, right? It's got to be published. So in this essence, what we could do, more contractor infrastructure would really help in the free software world. And when I say infrastructure, I don't mean does a website somewhere on the internet technically exist for doing this. I mean, there is a blessed singular place where the community can go, and like if a business came to you and asked you, oh, I'm looking for a contractor to do some free software work, you can point them to this one place and go, yeah, go over there, and they'll find a person for you, right? That would be a really good way of improving the way in which we can interact with, especially small businesses that might need more hand holding. The third, and the most interesting for me as an independent contractor who works on Inkscape, is micro subscriptions. Now, I'm currently on Patreon. It's a proprietary service, and before I joined, I weighed up the ethics of using it and the implications as a system. You know, whether the reputation of the company was good before I decided to use it. But the mechanics are simple enough. Users who cannot afford to give a programmer a large sum of money can instead give a monthly subscription, and the small amounts taken together can provide a meaningful income to the developer. And in exchange, the programmer will be expected to pay attention to what the users need. Even in this, which would be a diluted sense, right? Users would have to form a consensus perhaps. Maybe there would be voting, maybe there would be prioritization, but they would have a say. They'd be involved in a community, they'd be contributing. So users are, in this system, the way I do it is users are kept up to date with what the programmer is doing, what I'm doing in a blog. I provide a video blog every week. It's on YouTube, but it's also on my Patreon. It's also mirrored elsewhere. And also other patrons, but not me, can provide things like stickers and t-shirts and access to things before everybody else. Although, you know, within reason, while Patreon has been designed with video creators in mind, it does work relatively well for programmers as well. We could do this in the free software world. A micro subscription infrastructure, like the contracting infrastructure above, which was blessed, well known, importantly singular, would be a great help. You know, digging into the kinds of work that Patreon does for its users, it's a hard problem, right? It would need dedicated, tireless work to figure out all of the international laws, sales and income tax and taxes, and all of the other stuff beside. But if it's something that we think is important, we should definitely consider having a free software equivalent, which was well known and everybody used, right? So having talked about money and the ways in which economics can be introduced, now I'm going to talk about the problems, right? So you've got some money into your project. What are the problems with introducing paid development services, right? Because I want to tell you about both sides. The first issue that I've seen is transactional. Sorry, I misslided that. The first issue is what's known as transactional behavior. Programmers can become less generous and more likely to consider changes transactional, right? They might sit on improvements rather than until they get significantly recompensed for their time. This is primarily a cultural issue. Having a culture of generosity, understanding what it means to do work in the public interest as well as in the private interest can help. Projects with good codes of conduct can express what it means to do private and public interest work. Another problem is socioeconomic discrimination, right? This is a serious problem. The nature of money means that a significant proportion of people don't have any money, right? Even with micro payments, you have to consider continuing to help people who don't have any money through things like the charity methods. But also, I think through education, right? We should, as projects, be offering skills and things so that these users are empowered through their education to be able to contribute to projects. I think if all projects had education as one of the things that they did, we would be able to encourage individuals to be involved if they could, whether it's bartering or programming directly. The second is internal competition, or programmers competing against each other. Programmers have a deep fear, like all human beings, of missing out on rewards when others are being paid for their work. Can create a negativity between people who would otherwise be collaborating. Having a good understanding of where the lines are drawn between, the private enterprise work and the public participation, I think is critical for avoiding any kind of infighting over what may be seen as a lose-lose or single pie, ungrowable pie. But again, this is a project culture thing. You can engage in your codes of conduct and have a straight, documented way in which you approach competition for what could be, a single contract. Next is project corruption. So projects where paid programmers both administer the project and also work on it may bend the project towards their own economic interests. This is why public interest is still a very good thing that we should do and we should have in free software projects. Keeping the paid parts of the project outside of administration decisions is a good idea to avoid a very human temptation, right, that can happen to any programmer that has a need to grow their subscriptions or contracts and and power over a project's infrastructure. Making sure that the project has a public interest policy or a charitable structure that can organize and keep everybody honest may be what a lot of projects need. And having talked about the problems, let's talk about the conclusions. So these are the problems that I'm on guard for, but there could be others. As I continue my mission to invite users to contribute to the Inkscape project through me, contracting, Patreon, bartering where possible. I'm trying lots of different things to figure out how we can serve both the public at large and also users as individuals. I think that free software would be stronger with more freedom, and that means involvement from more people with different resources other than programming skills. Empowering users means finding ways of converting their resources into their needs. And if what they have is money and what they need is software programming changes to your free software project, then we as programmers should make sure that it's easier to contribute, right? By asking them for money and in so doing, empowering them to have all of the freedoms they ought to have. And that is my talk. Thank you very much for listening. I realized that this was actually pretty short, 20 minutes.
Thanks very much, Martin.
I may have rushed this so badly, so I apologize if I talk too fast.
No, don't apologize at all. And I may just have actually accidentally closed my hex chat, so that's not great.
Oh no!
I know it's like the perfect comedy of.
So I should tell everybody. I actually practiced this talk, and it took the 35 minutes last time.
No, you did all the right things. Oh, well. So. I do remember while I opened my hex chat, there was some comments. People loved, the introducing money slide and the kind of the idea of the right way and the wrong way to use money. And again, while I pull up my Hex chat, there's another question. Oh yes, and you touched on it, but I wonder if you can expand on it. And it was I can't remember how you termed it, but it was about how the sorry, I just had it. Oh yes, inherently by money is power, and and obviously people with more money have more power. So how do you kind of balance that? I guess is a good question to start with.
So it's absolutely true that the reason why you may not want money to be involved is simply egalitarian, right? You want to be able to make decisions from the project's best interests. But having said that, a rich man's freedom is still freedom, right? And being paid by a business to make changes to your project, or even a fork for them. As a programmer, you can make decisions about what work you want to take, right? Whether you think that the work is too large, whether it's too manipulative. I feel like being an independent contractor allows me a lot of latitude in deciding what work I want to take. I think if Microsoft came to me and said, here's $1 million to make Inkscape a really horrible tool to use, I probably wouldn't take the work. That would be denying Microsoft their freedom to make changes, but then again, they're big enough and ugly enough to buy enough programmers to do whatever they want, right?
Big and ugly are some interesting adjectives there.
Sorry. That's just a colloquial saying. I don't mean to impugn anybody.
No, I wasn't disagreeing with you either. Here's another comment. Having the international contracting infrastructure ties in nicely to the keynote yesterday. I'm not sure if you saw it, but this person says there was specifically the keynote on acclimatizing the German government to fund international developers to develop.
I did see that, yes. Yeah, I did see that. And it is interesting actually how governments in some ways are more attuned to being able to contract. Universities as well. Several of the contracts that I've managed to secure have been with universities because culturally they're more capable of understanding, oh, we're hiring somebody to do work on this, oh, and it gets published in the public, right? Smaller businesses, independents, people like even larger businesses, to be honest, they're not culturally kitted out yet. And so having some good education for all different types of organizations that might interact with us as developers would be good, right? We want to be able to serve their needs, whether they're an individual Inkscape user who's an artist who's doing it as a small individual, like as a business, as a designer, or if they're a big designer house or a CNC workshop, etc. From my perspective.
Right. On micro subscriptions, and I know you mentioned you use the Patreon platform. Just to call out, people have been kind of starting their own list here. So I don't know if you have anything to supplement that, or but just to share others that people called out as Open Collective, Snowdrift. Someone said LibrePay, and another person chimed in LibreCelery, but I haven't heard of that one. And somebody asked if they're not sure if it's operational yet.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the great things about a lot of these infrastructure websites and things are they are attempting to attack this problem, which is a great sign because it means that we as a community are starting to get our heads around what may be necessary. The reason why I was explicit in saying that we need something that is blessed is that we need the leaders in our community to make a call about what kind of infrastructure we should have as a community, right? And say, no, LibrePay is the way to do it, right? And for us to focus on making sure that's easy for users to use. I can't stress this enough. The reason why I'm on Patreon is because it's where Inkscape users can get to, where I'd be confident pointing an Inkscape user to who isn't a programmer, isn't involved in the free software world. And it's a place where I can communicate with them. It doesn't help us if the tools are technically functional, but not designed well. Which is why there's an awful lot of effort that needs to be put in, both leadership-wise, design-wise, and making sure we have all of our ducks in a row about what it is we want the interaction between a free software project and individual users or small businesses to be.
Right. No, that makes sense, the leadership piece. Just to tie into that, somebody agreed you're absolutely right about the economic infrastructure is less mature than the legal and the technical. I've got a few more questions lining up here that I'll jump to, but I did wonder from myself personally, you know, I think I mentioned to you in our green room chat, I'm a project manager, but in the healthcare space in Ontario. And I think you were talking about a potential, you know, from a contracting standpoint under that theme, and a list of programmers that people could reach out to. So were you saying that that's something that doesn't exist? Or the term that comes to mind, and it's the wrong word, but in terms of public procurement in my sector, like the term vendor of record or something, is there any kind of vetted list out there?
There, again, very much like LibrePay and other stuff, I've heard of a number of different people who are attempting to attack this problem. It's the kind of infrastructure that takes a lot of effort. Like maybe we need a network of trust. Maybe we need you know, better trust models inside of our project, so we can say for definite, you know, this person that worked with me on this free software project, you know, it's important for me to give the thumbs up so that they can then get work as a contractor. You know, right now, if I work with somebody let's say I work with somebody on Inkscape, very unlikely that the people who will contract me will ever see the reputation that I built inside the community.
Yeah.
And that's a shame. And it's also true that like the contracts that I have may not ever be visible to people, so that reputation as well of me being a good worker, good to hire, etc., is also not visible inside the project. So, you know, it's one of these communications and trusts, and you know, we need to be paying attention to how we can make sure that business, the freedom to make changes inside of our code is also something that we express in terms of how trustworthy somebody is to make those changes on our behalf, because it's going to be a critical part of like building a reputation.
Yeah, super important themes. This next one I'll put to you, your prerogative if you think it's slightly out of scope for this talk, but I think it might be interesting, and it's, what was your process of evaluating the ethics of Patreon specifically? And I know you mentioned a lot of your users are already there, but were there other pieces to that?
Sure. So I used to actually be subscribed to a bunch of YouTubers on a platform called Subbable, which was a Patreon-like service that was then sold to Patreon. And, you know, when that happened, I had to make a decision about like, do I think that Patreon is a monopoly? Do I think that they are, you know, abusive? I'm consciously aware of the fact that like, as any web service turns into a monopoly, especially one that's proprietary, they're going to tend to they're going to have temptation, right, to do things which are against the user's best interests. It's good if we must have proprietary services in this area, then having multiples of them would be good, just in case, right, we have to move. The fact that we don't have a trusted charity, you know, to call out names like the SFC or the EFF or the FSF, who can host this kind of economic activity on our behalf, so to make sure that they're running the services in the most efficient and effective and non-profiteering way. But I to get to the actual question, which is how did I make that assessment? I basically looked at their blogs. I looked at like how they talked about their users. I looked at what users were saying about them, about what users were saying about like the fees that were charged and the percentages and so forth. And I compared them to a bunch of other sites, whether they seemed like a lot for the kinds of work that they were doing, but considering the effort that it seems to be involved in making sure that you have this like international search service that people from like Japan could sign up to and pay me as not donate, pay me as a programmer in America, right? That's madness. That's something that actually is quite a revolution in terms of, you know, the micro payments around the world.
I think this next one, I'm not sure if I understand the context fully, so I'll say it verbatim. But it is related to kind of investing in organizations being in different geographic locations. It says, we have charities and foundations to allow people to invest money, but in my opinion, they're hindered by the fact that they're often located in countries, which makes it difficult result. So they're saying, for example, European wants to give money to a US-based foundation or the reverse.
Yeah, in fact, so Inkscape is a software freedom conservancy project, and we are constantly getting messages from people in Japan and India and China saying that they cannot donate through PayPal to the SFC to Inkscape, which is a problem. It needs to be fixed. We don't know whether this is a configuration in PayPal or something that organizationally has to be done, or whether it's just not possible, right? Whether a charity in the US just cannot accept donations from outside. But it's sorry, I've lost the train of thought. What I was doing there. Yeah,
Well,
so no, it's a problem.
Sorry.
We know it's a problem. Like international trade, right? There are legal barriers put in place in order to stop fraud and stop issues between countries. Money laundering is an excellent example. We never want a free software project to be involved in some, international money laundering scheme. That's bad for the free software brand, let's say.
Yeah.
But it's it's important for us to enable free software. Now, I'll be honest. If I could collectively scour every single person here in Boston for their use of Inkscape and then convince them to donate money to me, pay me money. You see how easy it is to pay me money to work on Inkscape on their behalf, right? They needed the software to change, to get better, to be improved. I would do that simply because it's local. And I believe like local economics is something we should strive for, right? And if there are corporations out there, say for instance, if there's a small business in France who wants me to do a piece of work, and I know that like me or Mark or Tav or several other Inkscape developers could theoretically do this work, I might actually send them on and say, look, talk to this other contractor who I know who's in France, who could, who might be able to do the work locally, right? Simply because I think there is less complications, especially for contract work where there's payments and actual signing of the documents and things. And so like having a good network of individuals in different countries, say for instance, if I knew a programmer in India, right, who could do the work, and an Indian company came to me and said, we'd like to work on Inkscape, I'd love to be able to point them at that programmer and say, no, this dude, like he doesn't work on Inkscape every day, but like he can do the work. And, I'd love to be able to introduce you to him.
Oh, that's great. Somebody else asks if you've read a book by Amanda Palmer called The Art of Asking. And they say in the book, she elaborates that asking for financial support is also a way to recognize and build a relationship. And public users sometimes really want to be thankful.
So I find this really funny because I talked with Amanda Palmer many years ago about this exact problem before the book came out. And it's like, how do you get creatives, people who are doing work in the community and stuff? So it's really funny, especially when she was involved in that, like, should we say, problem where she'd raised a bunch of money and then was not paying the artists that she was being on stage with because for her being on stage was reward enough. There's definitely a sense that you should want to have a relationship with users, and that takes time and it takes effort. My Patreon is not free for me for time investment. I'm committed to making that relationship, but it does provide me with a way of talking to users, of getting their input into the things that are important to them in a way that I don't think would necessarily have been available to me if I wasn't engaging with them on an economic level.
Thanks for that. Just a comment here. I see the goal, how to build and use infrastructure to create alternatives to corporate capitalism. Somebody asks, unless you wanted to comment on that, somebody asks, how about an indirect barter? A gives to B and B gives to C and C gives to A. So a bit of a...
So this actually happens where you have what would be phrased as social capital, right? So say you're invested in a project. You would hope that you are building a reputation and you are being generous with your time, and that in some way, this generosity would at some point in the future be refocused back on you as somebody else's generosity upon you, right? This is a good way of developing a community internally that's kind and available to each other, right? And responsive to each other's needs. If you have a person from outside, however, like it gets harder because you have trust issues and tracking and things like that, even between projects, right? So I've had the most devil of a time reporting issues and talking with people in the GNOME project. I don't know why, but every single time I engage, it falls to pieces. And part of it seems like the reputation that I have in the Inkscape project doesn't follow me.
Right.
The GNOME project. So they're like, oh, look, there's just this dude who's like complaining about this very specific issue. and like, if I met them in real life at LibrePlanet or whatever, like we talked face to face, I'd probably have a better time explaining what my issues were, and I'd be able to be like, I'm Martin, I'm involved in this project, I need this problem, I need to figure out a solution to this problem for Inkscape, right? It's not for something. But then again, like if I could rock up to the GNOME project and lay down a fat wad of bills and be like, I need this problem fixed, could you fix this for me? It's a different type of relationship. I might not need the organization of the trust, right? The trust network to follow me around.
I just love that image, the wad of cash.
GNOME has problems. Fix. Yeah.
Slap. You know, a couple of people, well, first, more kudos, great presentation, Mr. Owens.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, a couple of people have asked actually about training. Do you actively, do you have training opportunities for users of Inkscape? Another person has asked for your Patreon link, which might be somewhere. And, this one, again, might be a little out of scope. I'm wrapping them all together, though, but you're welcome to address it if you like. And it's somebody's looking for recommendations for someone who's starting in illustration or digital art as a field.
To start with the recommendations, so it depends on what type of digital art you are doing and where you want to focus. David Rivoy did an excellent talk about being involved in the free software world as a digital artist. Critter is an excellent tool to be involved with. Inkscape is good at design, specifically like logos and things. Blender can actually be very good at animating. Believe it or not, you can import an SVG and like animate it. And I don't know if you've ever seen Chris Rogers' videos, both GNOME video. Like look at the GNOME project release video that Chris Rogers made. It's beautiful animation, graphics made in Inkscape and then imported into Blender and animated. So each of the tools that you learn in the free software world is a power, and then you can power up by combining them. Personally, I'm not actually very experienced in Critter or Blender, so for me, my power is limited to programming, which is why I ask for help so much. There was a couple of other questions that I was interested in answering there. Could you rewind? Yep,
rewinding. Actually, somebody wanted your Patreon link. Yay.
Oh, it's Dr. Mo, DOCTORMO. So patreon.com/Dr. Mo.
Okay. And a few people were asking about Inkscape training, if you're holding any, I guess, sooner.
Yeah, if people are interested, maybe I'll join the IRC channel and get people's details, because I actually offer, so when people come into the Rocket chat, which is chat.inkscape.org, people come into that chat room and they ask a question about how to fix a problem. Sometimes it's not possible to give an answer in chat. And so we have a Big Blue Button instance, which is kindly donated for French University, which we jump onto often to give people instruction, all right, to be like, oh, how do you do this? And then we walk them through, much like we are here on Big Blue Button, but I'd be with one, maybe two other individuals where I'm walking a user through. And I'll be honest, they're kind of surprised that, a programmer or even another designer would be attentive enough to give somebody instruction. I think as a programmer, it is interesting how I should not technically be the person to come to for training, if that makes sense, because as a profession, I want to be programming, but I completely understand the need to fill the hole, which is making sure that people can use Inkscape effectively. And also there's a lot to learn as a programmer, being involved in support, right? Helping the users on the front lines.
Oh, that's great, and totally makes sense. Somebody actually did us the favor of posting your Patreon in the IRC, so that's good. Somebody also posted a link to other crowdfunding platforms, kind of a bit of a list, which is awesome. This one's interesting, and it's about payment infrastructure at the distro level. And I think some distros, or at least one that I've heard of, does this. But in gnu+linux, or operating system of choice. Well, I guess let's focus on the free stuff. Sorry. What are your opinions on that? This user says if their distro actually had a payment option built in, they would use it.
I've spent so much time talking to people in Debian and Ubuntu. I used to be involved in the Ubuntu project. I was physically at the Ubuntu Developers Summits where I'd bring this problem up, right? They had an app store, they were taking money, and yet it was impossible to have Inkscape for money. It was like a mad situation where resources could be given to proprietary software in the Ubuntu world, but not to free software. Simply because the problem is too hard, and who do you give the money to, and who do you try? And the answer at the end of the day is literally give it to anybody. Like, just find a programmer that works on the thing and give them the money. Like, it's not necessarily a hard problem. I get it. There's trust issues, there's legal issues, and so forth and so on. But like, at the end of the day, stop being a barrier, right, to flowing of contributions. I know that there's people who are working on the problem. There's package kit, which could have some extensions done to it to provide ways of donating. I also know that there's a lot of free software projects that release onto the Android App Store, for example, or on the Microsoft App Store, and they have a free and a contribution versions, right? They have two different versions, and then there are actually some other free software projects who are free in the F-Droid and not free in Android, the Android App Store. OSM and is a good example of this. And so, like, if there is a way of making it easier for users to cooperate, then it's good. Having said all of that, any infrastructure that's given inside of an operating system desktop, for example, I think must also be involved with making sure the user has and continues to have a voice right within the project that they're funding. It's no good just paying for something. As I said in the talk, it's not about rewarding you for work you did in the past.
Right.
We want to enable users to push projects forwards to get better, and more specifically, get better in the ways that users need.
Right.
And that really does involve opening this dialogue up, right?
Yeah, no, and it's a very specific nuance. A few people are bringing up the pay what you want model, and this is getting at something different. We do 2 minutes left, so I will give you a chance to kind of say any if there are any final messages. And the only other thing I'll pick up on, and again, you're welcome to leave it or not, I don't quite understand the context, but the popularity contest, specifically in the Debian distribution, and people are talking about using that as a rough metric, but I didn't get the full context. I don't know if that flags anything for you that you'd want to talk about. Or
there's a system called Popcon, which may be related to that, but maybe I could join IRC and figure out what the specifics are. Okay. I know I was badly rebuffed by the Debian project when I suggested money should be involved, and they were like predominantly, nope, not interested. Maybe it was the wrong year to talk to them about the problem, but this is why I think this is a cultural thing that has to come with some structures, right? Some example of the fact that I've not just come here and say money would be a good idea, but I've thought about this problem over many years. I've had many discussions, and I think this isn't a problem we should shy away from. This is something that we could use to improve the freedom, and I think that freedom is one of the most valuable parts of a free software project. And if users are not getting freedom to modify, then they're not really getting all of the value, right? And is it a surprise that they treat us like freeware when there's no route to being involved?
Well, on that note, would you like to end, or is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'll answer questions all day, but like, thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Martin. I mean, again, this was a really important talk, and thanks for being so engaged and for bringing your experience and expertise and insights to this. And again, for everybody who's watching, Martin, if you'd like to continue the conversation an IRC with them, of course, you're welcome to. A lot of people saying thanks, Martin, and
Oh, thanks,
typing
thanks,
claps,
guys.
many claps. So again, it was great to meet you, and thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, James, for moderating, and I hope to see you and we can talk in real life someday.
Yeah, that sounds great. I hope so too. All right, everybody. Cheers. Enjoy the rest of the conference. We're almost done. Sad. Take care.